Part 1, The Last Embrace. The toxic snow fell in thick sheets outside the abandoned mining shelter, each flake carrying crystallized chemicals that would burn flesh on contact. Alara pressed her back against the inner wall, cradling her infant son Arak closer to her chest, using her body heat to warm his small, shivering form. The shelter's temperature had dropped dangerously low since the heating unit had failed 2 cycles ago. "Just a little longer, my heart," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling winds outside. Her violet eyes, characteristic of the Vexari people, had dulled with exhaustion and hunger. The rations had run out yesterday, and the emergency beacon she'd activated weeks ago remained unanswered, as she knew it would. Exiles received no aid from the collective. Alara had understood the consequences when she chose to keep her child, defying the strict population controls imposed after their homeworld began dying. Unauthorized pregnancies were terminated. Those who resisted were cast out. But she couldn't bear to part with the life growing inside her, the last living piece of Tiro, her bonded mate who had died in the mineral mines of this very moon. "Your father explored these tunnels," she told Arak, stroking his feverish forehead. The infant's skin had an unhealthy bluish tinge that made her chest tighten with fear. "He always said Nimbus had secrets worth discovering." She pulled the thermal blanket tighter around them both, though it retained little heat after so many days. Outside, the storm intensified. The shelter's old walls groaned under the pressure, and fine particles of toxic snow seeped through invisible cracks, dusting the floor with glittering poison. Alara's throat constricted as she imagined the structure eventually giving way, burying them in the frozen wasteland. A quicker end than starvation, perhaps, a mercy. The thought made her weep silently, tears freezing on her cheeks before they could fall. Not for herself, for Arak, who would never know anything but cold and hunger and fear in his brief existence. "I'm sorry," she murmured, pressing her lips to his small forehead. His skin was so cold now. "I wanted to give you stars and distant worlds. I wanted you to see the crystal forests of our homeland, to know joy." Her limbs felt heavier with each passing moment, the cold seeping into her bones. She knew the signs of hypothermia among her people, the drowsiness that came before the end. Summoning her remaining strength, Alara began to hum an ancient lullaby, a melody passed down through generations of her people. The vibrations in her chest seemed to soothe Arak, whose tiny fingers clutched weakly at the fabric of her thermal suit. "Beneath the 3 moons my child sleeps," she sang softly. "Among the stars my child dreams." Outside, the storm's fury intensified. The shelter creaked ominously as a fresh wave of snow hammered against it. Alara's vision blurred at the edges, darkness closing in. She had heard that freezing was peaceful in the final moments, like drifting into sleep. Perhaps they would dream together, she and Arak, of warmer places, of Tiro waiting for them somewhere beyond. "The void is vast, but love is greater still," she continued, her voice growing fainter. "Let its light guide you when I am gone." Her head slumped forward, resting against Arak's. The infant had stopped shivering, a dangerous sign. Yet Alara could no longer feel afraid. She was too tired, too cold. With the last of her energy, she created a cocoon around him with her body, shielding him from the encroaching cold with everything she had left. "Rest now," she whispered. "We journey to the stars together." As consciousness slipped away, the storm outside seemed to change its tune. The howling took on a different pitch, a mechanical whine that cut through the wind's natural fury. But Alara was too far gone to recognize the sound of approaching engines, the bright lights cutting through the blizzard outside, or the heavy footsteps that approached the shelter door. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her was a sudden rush of warmer air as the door was forced open, and the silhouette of a figure unlike any she had ever seen before. Then nothing. Jace Delaney squinted at the holographic display hovering above his wrist terminal. The mineral scanner had picked up an unusual reading, a faint heat signature where none should exist on this abandoned section of Nimbus. 20 years, as a frontier prospector, had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about this anomaly felt important. "Recalibrate and confirm," he commanded the ship's AI as he pulled on his environmental suit, "and prepare the emergency medical kit." "Warning," the AI responded in its flat tone. "External temperature is minus 73 degrees Celsius. Toxic precipitation levels exceed safe parameters. Venturing outside is not recommended." Jace secured his helmet with a practiced motion. Noted, keep the engines warm. The moment he stepped outside his ship, the storm's fury engulfed him. Even through his insulated suit, he felt the bite of the extreme cold. The visibility was near zero, but the augmented reality display in his helmet guided him toward the anomaly, now confirmed as two distinct heat signatures, one significantly weaker than the other. It took him nearly 30 minutes to traverse the 100 meters to the abandoned mining shelter, fighting against gale-force winds that threatened to knock him off his feet. When he finally reached the dilapidated structure, he had to force the door open against a drift of accumulated toxic snow. What he found inside stopped him cold. A humanoid figure, clearly female but not human, was slumped against the far wall, curled protectively around what appeared to be an infant. Their skin had a pale lavender hue, now dangerously ashen. Neither was moving. Jace rushed forward, his medical scanner already in hand. Vitals extremely low but present, he muttered to himself as he read the results. Hypothermia, dehydration, malnutrition. Working quickly, he unpacked his emergency shelter module, a self-contained environment that would create a warm bubble around them all. Within seconds, heated air began to circulate. "Come on," he murmured as he gently separated the infant from its mother's embrace. The baby was alarmingly cold, its breathing shallow. Jace activated thermal wraps around both of them, then administered emergency hydration and nutrient injections calibrated for xenobiological systems, a standard feature of frontier medical kits designed for encounters with non-human sentience. As warmth slowly returned to the shelter, Jace studied the alien woman more closely. Her features were delicate but strong, high cheekbones, a narrow nose, and pointed ears that swept back gracefully. Her hair was a silvery blue, matted from days without care. "What brought you to this frozen hell?" he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. No identifying marks or technology suggested her species or origin. Whoever she was, she didn't belong here, not alone, not with a child. The infant stirred first, letting out a weak cry that quickly grew stronger. Its tiny fists balled up as it squirmed inside the thermal wrap. Its eyes, when they opened, were a brilliant violet, almost luminescent in the shelter's dim light. "Hey there, little one," Jace said softly, supplementing the wrap's heat with his own body warmth as he cradled the child. "You're safe now." The sound of her child's cry seemed to pull the mother back from the brink. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened to reveal eyes of the same vibrant violet as her child's. She gasped, immediately trying to sit up despite her weakness. "Easy," Jace soothed, keeping his voice gentle despite the language barrier. "You're safe. Your child is safe." The alien woman's gaze darted between Jace and her baby, confusion and fear evident in her expression. She spoke rapidly in a language his translator couldn't immediately process, a series of melodic clicks and sustained vowels. Jace slowly moved closer, still holding her child, and carefully transferred the infant back into her trembling arms. The woman clutched her baby close, tears forming in her eyes as she verified for herself that the little one was alive and warming. "My name is Jace," he said, tapping his chest before extending his portable translator toward her. "Can you speak? The device will learn your language if you talk enough." For a long moment, she simply stared at him, cradling her child. Then, hesitantly, she touched her own chest. "Ilara," she said, her voice hoarse from cold and disuse. She then nodded toward the infant. "Arak." Jace smiled behind his helmet visor, which he now removed in the warming shelter. "Ilara and Arak, I'm going to help you both. You're not alone anymore." The storm outside howled its disapproval, but within the emergency shelter, life had been granted a second chance. Ilara awoke fully for the first time in what felt like an eternity, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar warmth surrounding her. The air carried strange scents, metallic and clean, with traces of something spicy and pleasant. She bolted upright, her maternal instincts flaring in panic. "Eric," she cried out, her voice cracking. "He's right here," came a deep voice from across the small space. "He's been fed and his fever has broken." Ilara's eyes adjusted to the soft lighting, focusing on the strange being who held her son. The creature, a male she assumed, had skin the color of the palest sand and hair like dark copper. His eyes were a startling blue, almost like the precious aquastone gems of her homeworld. He was a human, She had never seen one in person before, only in educational materials from the collective archives. Eric cooed contentedly in the human's large hands, looking healthier than he had in weeks. His color had returned to a normal lavender hue, and his eyes were bright and alert. "What did you give him?" Ilara asked, her translator now functioning after processing enough of her language. "A synthetic nutrient formula," the human replied, his own device converting his words to her language with only a slight delay. "Universal adaptation capabilities, standard issue for explorers like me." Ilara swung her legs over the edge of the narrow bed, noticing she'd been changed into a clean thermal suit. Practical, not invasive, she noted with relief. "I'm Jace Delaney," the human continued, carefully transferring Arak back to her eager arms. "Independent prospector. I was surveying this region for rare minerals when I picked up your heat signatures." Ilara clutched Arak close, breathing in his scent, reassuring herself he was truly all right. "You saved us," she said simply, violet eyes meeting blue. "Why?" Jace looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Because you needed saving." Such a simple answer to a question that revealed so much about their different worlds. Among her people, such altruism toward outsiders, especially exiles, was unheard of. "How long have I been unconscious?" she asked, noting the improved condition of her hands, which had been frostbitten and raw. "About 2 days local time," Jace replied, moving to a small cooking unit where something aromatic simmered. "I've been treating you both with nanomeds. Your physiology responded well." He returned with a steaming cup, offering it to her. "Nutrient broth should be compatible with your system." Ilara accepted the cup hesitantly, then took a small sip. The warm liquid spread through her body like a blessing, awakening hunger she'd suppressed for too long. "We're Vexari," she offered, feeling she owed him at least this much. "From the Morai system, I was exiled for keeping my child when the reproduction lottery denied me permission." Jace's expression darkened. "They exiled you for having a baby." "Resources are scarce since our atmosphere began failing," she explained, finding herself defensive of her people despite their cruelty. "Population is strictly controlled." "So they sent a mother and infant to die alone on a toxic moon." There was an edge to his voice that surprised her, anger on her behalf. "Technically, they sent me to the penal colony on Nimbus Prime," Ilara clarified. "But the settlement was abandoned after the chemical storms worsened. My distress signal went unanswered." Jace sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not so close as to threaten. "And the child's father?" Pain lanced through her at the mention of Tiro. "He died in these mines 2 cycles ago, an accident. I was already carrying Arak but hadn't yet registered the pregnancy." She looked down at her son. "By the time I was discovered, it was too late to apply for exemption." "I'm sorry," Jace said, and she could hear the genuine empathy in his voice. An awkward silence fell between them, two strangers from different worlds, connected by a moment of extreme circumstance. Ilara studied him openly now, curiosity overcoming caution. His frame was larger than a Vexari male's, his shoulders broader, his hands stronger. Yet there was a gentleness in how he'd handled Arak, in how he now watched them both with concern. "Your people," she ventured, "do they control childbirth as well?" Jay shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "No, though some would argue we could use a little more control. Earth is overcrowded in parts." "Earth," she repeated, tasting the foreign word. "I've heard stories, a blue world." "Blue and green and brown and white," he confirmed. "Sometimes too loud, often too busy, but alive in a way that gets under your skin." Eric chose that moment to reach out a tiny hand toward Jace, violet eyes wide with infant curiosity. Without thinking, Jace extended a finger, which the baby promptly grabbed with surprising strength. Ilara watched this simple interaction with a strange tightness in her chest. Among her people, children were precious, rarely handled by anyone outside the immediate family unit. Yet here was her son, forming an instant connection with this alien who had saved their lives. "You have children?" she asked. Jace's expression shifted subtly. "No, never found the right time or the right person." Something in his tone made Ilara look closer, seeing past the confident exterior to a solitude that mirrored her own. A spacefarer, alone among the stars, by choice or circumstance she couldn't tell. "Thank you," she said finally, the words inadequate for the debt she owed him. for not leaving us to die." His eyes met hers, holding her gaze with unexpected intensity. "I would never have left you there, Alara. Not you, not Eric, not anyone." And in that moment, something shifted between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared humanity that transcended their different forms and origins. In his eyes, she saw not a stranger, but a kindred spirit who had crossed the void to find her when her own people had turned away. "The storm's intensifying," Just announced on the third day, reviewing atmospheric readings on his wrist terminal. "We won't be able to make it back to my ship until it passes. Could be another week, maybe longer." Alara stood beside him at the small viewing port, watching toxic snowflakes swirl in violent patterns outside. The emergency shelter had become a strange, intimate world unto itself, a bubble of warmth and safety amid Nimbus's deadly landscape. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You're trapped here because of us." Just turned to her, his expression softening. "I'm not trapped. I'm exactly where I need to be." Their eyes met, and Alara felt a now familiar flutter in her chest. Over the past days, they had fallen into an unexpected rhythm together. Just had fashioned a small crib for Uruk from supply containers, taught Alara to operate the food synthesizer, and shared stories of his travels across the star systems. In turn, she had told him about Vuxari culture, their art and music, their connection to the cosmic energies they called the flowing tide. She found herself revealing things she'd never shared with anyone outside her bondmate Tara, her childhood dreams, her secret doubts about the collective's harsh laws. "Before you found us," she ventured, moving away from the viewing port to check on her sleeping son, "I was ready to join Tara in the beyond. I had accepted our fate." Just followed her, his tall frame making the shelter seem even smaller. "And now? Now I want to live," she admitted, tucking the thermal blanket more securely around Uruk. "For him, for myself." The shelter's lights dimmed automatically as evening cycle began, casting everything in a soft, amber glow. Outside, the storm howled like a living thing, rattling the shelter's reinforced walls. "Tell me about Earth again," Alara requested, settling onto the small seating area. "About the oceans." Just smiled, joining her on the cushioned bench. Their shoulders brushed as he adjusted his position, a casual touch that sent awareness tingling through her skin. "The Pacific at sunrise is like nothing you've ever seen," he began, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "The water stretches endlessly, reflecting the sky until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. And when you dive beneath the surface," he paused, eyes distant with memory, "it's like entering another universe." "I've never seen a true ocean," Alara confessed. "Only the silicon seas of our colony world. They don't move with tides like yours." "Someday you will," Just promised impulsively. "You and Uruk both." The certainty in his voice made her breath catch. "You speak as if our paths will remain connected beyond this shelter." Just turned to face her fully, hesitation visible in his features. "Would that be unwelcome?" Alara considered the question carefully. By Vuxari tradition, it would be years before she could consider another bondmate after Tara's passing. Yet here, exiled and reborn through near death, did those traditions still bind her? "No," she answered truthfully, "it would not be unwelcome." Something changed in the air between them, an electric possibility that hadn't been acknowledged until now. Just reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her face with a gentle hand. His skin was warmer than hers, his fingers calloused from years of work. "Your people," she whispered, heart racing, "do they form bonds with those from other worlds?" "Some do," he replied, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "Love doesn't always follow expected paths." The word love hung between them, perhaps premature, yet somehow not entirely out of place. In the crucible of survival, connections formed quickly, intensely. Alara had experienced this once before with Tara in the early days of their colony when each day brought new challenges. "I still honor what I had with Tara," she said softly. "He gave me Uruk, he will always be part of me." "As he should be," Just agreed immediately. "I would never ask you to forget." From his crib, Uruk made a small sound in his sleep, drawing both their attentions. They watched him together, this miracle child who had survived against all odds. "When I found you," Just confessed, his voice barely audible over the storm, "you were both so still, I thought I was too late. When you opened your eyes," he broke off, emotion tightening his throat. Alara reached for his hand, twinning her slender fingers with his thicker ones. But you weren't too late. You were exactly on time. With infinite slowness, respecting boundaries neither had fully defined, just leaned closer. Alara met him halfway, their lips connecting in a tentative kiss that quickly deepened. His taste was alien yet familiar, like something she'd known in dreams. The sensation of his arms around her felt both strange and right, as if her body had been waiting to discover this particular embrace. When they finally separated, both breathless, the storm outside seemed to fade from awareness. There was only this shelter, this moment, this connection neither had sought but both now treasured. I've been alone for so long, Jus admitted, forehead resting against hers. Since leaving Earth, I've never stayed in one place, never let myself put down roots. And I've been surrounded by my people, yet alone in my choices, Alara responded. Until Uruk, until you. As if summoned by his name, the infant began to fuss, hungry despite the late hour. Alara moved to attend to him, lifting him from his makeshift crib with practiced ease. When she settled back beside Jus, Uruk in her arms, the human's arm came around them both, a protective circle that felt like the foundation of something new. The storm cannot last forever, she murmured as Uruk quieted against her. Jus pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. No, but what comes after might be even more beautiful. Outside, the toxic snow continued to fall, layering the landscape in deadly beauty. But within the shelter, something was blooming that duffed the barren world around them, a warmth that had nothing to do with environmental controls and everything to do with hearts finding each other across the void of space and circumstance. 9 days after Jus had found them, the storm finally broke. The sudden silence woke Alara from sleep, the absence of howling winds more startling than their constant presence had been. Beside her on the narrow sleeping platform, Jus stirred, his arm tightening protectively around her waist. It's over, she whispered, watching the first clear light of Nimbus's distant sun filter through the viewing port. The toxic snow glittered like diamond dust outside, beautiful despite its deadly nature. Just checked his environmental sensors. Atmospheric conditions stabilizing. We can attempt the trek back to my ship within the hour. Reality crashed in upon Alara with sudden force. These days in the shelter had created an intimate bubble, separate from the universe and its complications. Now they would have to face what came next. What happens to us now? She asked, her voice small as she glanced toward Uruk, still sleeping peacefully in his crib. The collective will not welcome us back. We have nowhere to go. Just sat up, taking her hands in his. Come with me, he said simply. Where? Everywhere, anywhere. His eyes were earnest, passionate. My survey contract with Nova Industries gives me access to dozens of systems. I've been saving for my own ship, a real one, not just this prospecting vessel. We could see worlds you've never imagined. The offer took her breath away. You would take on a refugee and her child. The collective has marked me as an exile. It could bring complications for you. I've never cared much for political boundaries, Jus replied with a small smile. And I've always worked best outside the system. Alara looked around the small shelter that had been their world these past days. Just like that, you would change your solitary life. It already changed the moment I found you, he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I've drifted between stars for 15 years, Alara. I've seen wonders that defy description, but I've seen them alone. What's the point of discovering the universe if you have no one to share it with? His words resonated with something deep inside her, a longing she'd suppressed during her years in the rigid collective society. Even with Tara, their lives had been structured, predictable, bound by duty and tradition. What about Uruk? She asked, the most important question. A ship is no place for a child. Children are adaptable, Jus countered. More so than adults, and we wouldn't be wandering forever. There's a settlement on Proxima Centauri's fourth planet, New Avalon. It's a haven for those seeking a fresh start. Independent, diverse, I have contacts there. Alara rose from the sleeping platform, moving to gather their few belongings. Her mind raced with possibilities and fears. The collective teaches that outsiders cannot be trusted, that other species harbor secret agendas. Jussa's expression grew serious. Do you believe that? No, she answered honestly, not anymore. She looked at him, really looked, seeing beyond the alien features to the soul beneath. In 9 days, she had come to know him better than she'd known most of her own people in a lifetime. His kindness, his quiet strength, his easy laughter. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at Uruk. The careful way he held them both as if they were precious beyond measure. "I'm afraid," she admitted, vulnerability raw in her voice. "Not of you, of starting over, of failing Uruk." Just crossed to her, closing the distance between them. "Fear is natural, but don't let it make your choice for you." From his crib, Uruk awoke with a happy gurgle, reaching upward with tiny hands as sunlight played across his face. The first real sunlight he had seen in weeks. Alara lifted him, holding him close as she made the most important decision of both their lives. "If we come with you," she said slowly, "I need to know that we're not just a rescue you feel responsible for, that this is real." Jussa's expression softened as he placed one hand on Uruk's head and the other on Alara's cheek. "When I was a boy on Earth, my grandmother told me that the universe has patterns, that nothing happens without purpose." His voice grew thick with emotion. "I've spent my life searching remote worlds, thinking I was looking for rare minerals, but maybe I was just following a pattern that was leading me to you." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers in the traditional Vuxari gesture of profound connection, a detail she had mentioned only once, days ago. The fact that he remembered that he honored her customs brought tears to her eyes. "I love you," he said simply. "Both of you, not out of duty or obligation, but because you've awakened something in me I thought was long buried." Outside, the landscape of Nimbus stretched toward the horizon, desolate and beautiful in its deadly stillness. The site of their near ending and their beginning. "We'll need supplies for Uruk," she said, her voice steadying as decision crystallized into certainty. "And data on human environments to ensure compatibility." Joy bloomed across Jussa's face as he recognized her answer. "I have complete xenobiology tools on my ship, and we can obtain whatever else we need at the Helios Station trading post." As they prepared to leave the shelter, Alara paused one last time, looking back at the small space that had held so much transformation. She whispered a traditional Vuxari blessing, thanking the space for its protection. Just secured the environmental suits, his movements efficient yet gentle as he helped fit Uruk's specialized infant protection module. "Ready." Alara nodded, her son secure against her chest, her future unwritten for the first time since she could remember. "Ready." They stepped out onto the glittering toxic snow, making their careful way across the frozen landscape toward Jussa's ship. Above them, Nimbus's pale sky stretched endlessly, the distant stars barely visible through the thin atmosphere. "What will we tell him when he's older?" Alara asked, glancing down at Uruk, safely cocooned against the elements. "About how we came to be a family." Jussa's hand found hers, their gloved fingers intertwining as they walked side by side. Through their face shields, their eyes met, violet and blue, different yet seeing the same future. "We'll tell him the truth," Juss answered, his voice clear through the comm system. "That in the coldest place in the galaxy we found the warmth to begin again, that love can bloom even on a frozen moon." Ahead of them, Jussa's ship came into view, its metallic hull gleaming in the sunlight. Not an ending, Alara realized, but a beginning. A new horizon stretching before them, vast with possibility. As they approached the vessel that would carry them to the stars, Uruk reached out a tiny hand toward the sky, as if already grasping for the wonders that awaited. And for the first time since leaving her homeworld, Alara felt the weight of exile lift from her shoulders, replaced by something lighter, brighter, and infinitely more precious. "Hope,"